Welcome to the fourth session of DevOps. So in the previous three sessions, we have covered the introduction to DevOps and then the concepts of CI and CD. And then in the last session, we have covered the concepts of high availability like the load balancing, failover, clustering, and many more concepts. Okay. So now in this fourth session, along with a few more next sessions, we are going to cover a few important critical concepts that is specifically related with the networking, okay, which is very important for you to understand if you really would like to have a very proficient DevOps expert, okay, because what we discuss about the DevOps is not a single tool or technology, right? So your DevOps is a combination of multiple tools and technologies. There are multiple tools and technologies are involved in the DevOps, okay, and we use all to get in all in together, okay, to implement the complete DevOps functionalities, or you can say to get the complete DevOps benefits. Like some of the tools are, we know about that, we have a Jenkins, we have GitHub, we have GitLab, then we have a Terraform, we have Docker for containerized system, we have a Kubernetes, which is an orchestration tool, right? There are multiple tools. So DevOps is a combination of multiple tools, and specifically when we talk about the infrastructure, which is one of the core requirement in the DevOps, okay. So in that case, if you are going to understand some infrastructure as a code tool like the Terraform, okay, and apart from that, there are multiple managed to services are also available from the multiple leading cloud service providers. Like from AWS, we have a cloud formation, okay, which is a parallel tool of like a Terraform, where we create the multiple resources with the help of code, right? So it is very important to understand the some basic concepts of the networking. It's not very at a deep level, okay, but you should have some basic level of understandings, okay, because when we configure the multiple resources, okay, so there are certain inputs that you need to provide during the execution. Okay, for example, if you are going to configure your resources in your any of the cloud, okay, so there would be a term that will come CIDR. You have to specify the CIDR. There will be a term called VPC, and inside the VPC you will get a term subnet, and inside that subnet you will get a term called public subnet and private subnet, right? So there are multiple networking concepts are there, and all are related with each other, okay, and all these core concepts you should understand properly when you really wanted to work in the DevOps proficiently or efficiently. Okay, so for today and for next few sessions, I am going to cover all the networking concepts that is required in the DevOps from the basics. Okay, so that you will get a complete end-to-end understanding of that one. Okay, so now specifically for today, what is the agenda for today? Let me write it here. So the agenda for today is VPC, along with that subnet, where we will discuss about the public subnet and private subnet, and along with that I will give some understanding of the CIDR, but this we are going to cover in detail in the next subsequent sessions, right? So now let us talk about the VPC. Okay, so now before that, let me tell you, if you are going to work on the some different cloud service providers, then you may get the different term for the VPC, okay, and but the concept is same. So VPC is referred as virtual private cloud. So if you are in the AWS, then you will see the term same VPC. On IBM cloud, it's same VPC. In GCP, Google Cloud Platform, it is again VPC. But if you go to Azure, okay, it is referred as virtual net, VNet, virtual net. If you go to the Oracle Cloud OCI, it is referred as VCN, which is called virtual cloud network. Okay, so the terms are different. They are referred as different in some different cloud service providers, but the concept is same. So if you have a complete clarity on the VPC, okay, so these all terms are same. Okay, so when we work on the cloud, okay, this the very first thing that you have to configure after creating your account is the VPC, which is called the virtual private cloud. Now it is very clear from the name as well what exactly it is, virtual private cloud. So it is a virtual and a private cloud, right? This is your own private cloud, but this is virtual. Now what does it mean? So let me tell you. For example, there is a data center. There is a on-prem data center. This is an on-prem data center which is owned by you. You have your own building. You have your complete end-to-end setup which is owned by you. You have your own servers and everything owned by you. You are running that server. So this is your own premise secured data center. Everything is owned by you. Correct. Now suppose that you are using the cloud services. This is the data center of the AWS. Right. Now here in the AWS, you are not only the customer. There are multiple n number of lakhs of customers are there, right? And they all are on the AWS. So if I am saying that all are on the AWS, what does it mean? They all are inside the AWS data center. And that means the services that you buy from the AWS and by the other clients, it's running on the same data centers. Correct? The underlying hardware may be same or may be different based on the price plan that you have taken, whether you have taken the multi-tenancy or the dedicated, but all the clients, servers and applications are inside the same data center. Correct? Now, how you are going to segregate or how you are going to isolate each and every customer resources, just like your private data center. So this is owned by you. So you know everything about that one. It is secure because everything owned by me. I have a very private secured network. But when it is the cloud data center where the CSP, cloud service provider, is managing everything, then how you are going to make sure that your resources is completely isolated from the other customers? How you can make sure that your data should not be compromised? This is the server, physical server. It contains multiple virtual machines and based on multi-tenancy model, you may be owning one virtual machine and other customer is owning the other virtual machine on the same physical hardware. Other customer is using the other virtual machine. So that means it could be possible that there is an underlying hardware is same. And on top of that, the different virtual machines are owned by different customers. So in that case, how you are going to isolate your own infrastructure and applications from the other customers, just like your private data center. For that, you have the VPC, which is called the virtual private cloud, which is referred as VNet in the Azure and VCN in the OCI. Okay, so that's why the very first thing when you create your account in the any of the cloud service providers, the very first thing is you have to create this virtual private cloud for you, which will isolate your resources and applications and code from the other customers in the cloud. Okay, so this is the concept of your VPC. Okay, so now let me move forward. Before that, let me erase all these things. Okay, so what we learn about the VPC, it is a virtual private cloud. It is just like your own on-premise personal data center on the cloud. This is the VPC. Let me take it. This is the VPC. So that means suppose you have created your account in the AWS cloud. So suppose that this is your VPC. The very first thing that you have created your VPC, right? After that, you have to create your multiple resources. You may need to create the virtual machines, storage, some other softwares. There are multiple things you can configure inside the cloud, right? Now, after the VPC is created, or during the creation of, in fact, VPC, okay, the second very important term is called the subnet. Subnet. Okay, so what is subnet? It is also clear from the name as well. Subnet. That means you are dividing a network into different partitions or different parts. Now this is my VPC, so you can consider it as your own private network. Correct? Now when we create the VPC, we have to define a CIDR notification for the VPC. classless interdomain routing. Now, what is this CIDR? So, as I said, we will have another detailed session on the CIDR. But as of now, I am just giving a small concept. CIDR is a method of the IP addresses reservation in a particular network. Okay. For example, this is my VPC and I have to create multiple resources inside this VPC. Okay. So I have to decide the CIDR, like what is the total number of IP addresses that I want to be reserved in this particular VPC. So reserving an IP address means the total number of resources that need the IP addresses in your VPC that you have to ensure on that one. You can take certain buffer on that one. Okay. For example, you are creating a VPC and you are considering that at least I need the capacity of 200 IPs. Okay, so you have to decide a corresponding CIDR for that one. And how we define the CIDR? It is the form of like IP address x dot x dot x dot x slash forward slash and then again another number. This is the notifications for the CIDR. Okay, so this means the range of IP addresses. A single IP address is defined as x dot x dot x dot x, right? There are 4 octets in an IP address, right? And each octet is of 4 bit, right? This is the standard IP addressing scheme. So 4 octets are there, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I said each octet is of 4 bit. So how many bit we have in this single IP addresses? 32, right? So how 32? We have a 4 bit for each octet, 1, 2, 3, 4, and total 4 octets we have. Okay, so 8 into 4, 32. So total 32 bit we have. So this bit figure plays very important role in the CIDR to identify how many IP addresses are possible in a particular CIDR. Let me give an example. For example, I have defined a VPC and I have given the CIDR as 192.12.0.1 slash 28. This is the CIDR I have given for my VPC. So how many IP addresses are possible in this particular CIDR? The calculation is very straightforward. Here we know that total number of bits in an IP address is possible 32. So you just minus 32 and then 28. This is the last digit number which is after the forward. It is equal to 4, right? 32 minus 28, 4. So you just make it 2 raised to the power 4. That means 2 into 2 into 2 into 2, 4 times, right? This is coming as 32. Sorry, this is coming as 16. So that means in this CIDR, 16 IP addresses are possible. Total 16 IP addresses are possible. So if I am defining this CIDR to my VPC, that means inside this VPC, I can create 16 number of IP addresses. That means I may create 16 number of virtual machines to which I can assign the 16 IP addresses. Okay, or maybe any of the resources like some NFS or some file systems which need the IP addresses. So that means in nutshell that 16 IP addresses are possible in this particular CIDR. So this we are going to cover very detail in the CIDR session. Okay, so I have just explained you how to calculate the total number of IP addresses are possible in a particular CIDR and how we define a CIDR. So simple, what we learned, the CIDR we define in the form of IP address with 4 octets, forward slash and then a number. This is the CIDR notification. And how we check the how many IP addresses are possible in a CIDR? Just minus this number from 32, whatever number it is, and whatever the value is coming, you just make it 2 raised to the power of whatever the value is coming here, and then you can calculate the total number of IP addresses that is possible in a CIDR. Correct? So what we have learned so far, we have learned the VPC. What is VPC? Then when we create the VPC, we have to define a CIDR. Okay, and what is the format of a CIDR, and how we calculate the total number of IP addresses are possible in a particular CIDR. So this is a very important concept because when you move forward with the further on the Docker, Kubernetes, and many other software stack. Okay, so there you when you configure the containers, the clusters, so there you specify this CIDR notifications. So the concept to understand this CIDR is very important. right? So hope you have got the understanding of VPC and a CIDR. So now let me next tell you what is the subnet and what is private and public subnet. So let me quickly erase this one. Okay. Okay. So now what we have learned so far, let me draw it again. So this is your VPC or VNet or the VCN, okay, in the cloud. And suppose that we have given the CIDR 192.10.0.1/28. This is a CIDR for my VPC. So that means how many IP addresses are possible from this? We have calculated 16, right? So that means inside my this VPC, I can reserve 16 IP addresses. This is the very first thing. Second, what is subnet? Subnet is subnetting, means breaking a network into multiple subnetwork. Simple. We know that every devices in the network is in the public domain or maybe in the private network is connected with a network, whether it's a public network or internet or a private network, right? They all are connected with the network. So when we break a single network into the multiple sub networks, it is called the subnet, right? So after creating the VPC or during the creation of a VPC in the cloud, okay, what we need to do, we have to first define the subnet. For example, let us create three subnet. I want to create three subnet. This is my subnet 1, this is my subnet 2, and this is my subnet 3, right? So that means I have divided my this VPC, which is my virtual private cloud network, in three subnets. Okay. Now in three subnets, why I have divided, there could be multiple reasons for dividing the network into subnet. One of the basic reason for that, let me tell you. For example, this subnet you have created for your development environment, this you have created for your testing environment, and this is your production environment, because you want a complete segregation of the traffic between the subnets. So you can control the traffic between the different subnets within a VPC. You want to allow or deny the traffic between the different subnets, you can do that one, so that the traffic from the development and testing cannot reach to your production, or maybe you want to allow it. So you can control all these things with the help of multiple features like the security groups and multiple things that are available, right? So this is one of the reasons where you may want to segregate the different your environments. Okay, so for that what you can do, you can have a different subnet for that one, right? This is my development subnet, this is my testing subnet, and this is my production subnet, right? Now when we define the subnet, for subnet again we need to define the CIDR, CIDR. So the very first thing, we have to define the CIDR at the VPC level. So this was the CIDR at the VPC level, which is allowing the total number of IP addresses 16 in this VPC. So that means if I have created three subnets, the total number of resources that need the IP addresses in three subnet should be only 16, cannot go above that one. So that means whatever the CIDR that you are going to define for your subnet, it should be in a format where the total number of IP addresses should not exceed 16. Okay. Now suppose that for development, I am giving a CIDR 192.10.0.1/30, right? So now if I have given 30, then how many IP addresses are possible in this CIDR? Simple, 32 minus 30 equal to 2, and 2 raised to the power 2 equal to 2 into 2 equal to 4 IP addresses, right? So if suppose that I need the 4 machines, virtual machines, in my development subnet, so I can define this particular CIDR here. So by this way, if I am giving this particular CIDR to my development subnet, that means I need 4 virtual machines. That's why I am reserving the 4 IP addresses for my development machine, right? Similarly, you can reserve for the testing and for your subnet 3, which is the production as well. Okay, so suppose that you need more machines in your production, so you can define subnet something like 192.10.0.1 slash, and then you can specify 29. Okay, so what will happen in that case? 32 minus 29 equal to 3, and 2 raised to the power 3 equal to 2 into 2 into 2, and this is 8. So you can create 8 virtual machines here if you are reserving 8 IP addresses with the help of this particular CIDR in the production, right? So there are multiple other things that is specific to CIDR. I am just giving you a very rough calculation how to calculate the number of IP addresses from the CIDR calculation. Okay, but creating the CIDR, okay, from a particular VPN, it need a bit more further clarification, which we will discuss in the detailed CIDR session, right? Because the IP addresses that we reserve in a CIDR for the subnet, it should be derived from the VPN CIDR. It should not be outside of this VPN CIDR. Okay, because these all are the subnet which is getting derived from the VPC. So all the IP addresses, or you can say the CIDR that you are going to reserve for your subnet, it should be derived from parent CIDR only, which is the CIDR of your VPC. Okay, so now this is the concept of your subnet and the CIDR. How when we create the VPC, we have to assign a subnet, and when we create the different subnets, then we again need to assign the CIDRs for the subnet as well, which will be derived from the VPC CIDR. Okay, and then how to calculate the total number of IP addresses possible in each and every subnet. Right, now let me tell you public and private subnet, which is very straightforward and simple, and it is very clear from the name as well what exactly is the public subnet and what is the private subnet. Okay, now suppose that this is my VPC in the AWS, or you can say my private network. So here I have multiple servers, right, where my web servers are running, and then my application server is there, and my database is there where I have my data, right, and web server where I have deployed my web application. Okay, or maybe possible that my web application is deployed on the application server where my code is complete code is there. Now what happens is there, when we create this kind of architecture, okay, so we have to segregate the traffic which is coming from the outside. For example, this is your internet, okay, and from internet the users are accessing your website. So this is a internet, which is a public network, right? So you have to make sure the connection from your VPC to this particular internet, which is a public internet, should be very secure. Your data should not be compromised, your resources should not be compromised, right? For that we have a multiple solution in place, like you can use the firewall, and then multiple solutions are there, okay, for allow or disallow this kind of traffic. But what happens is that when we have a public facing applications, for that we have a different subnet which is called the public subnet. Public subnet. So when we have public subnet, then the resources in the public subnet have the public IP address. Why public IP address? Because this is going to connect with the internet. This is going to serve the traffic from the internet. So if some request need to reach to your resources from the internet, then it is possible only when you have the public IP addresses. Correct? So you have public network where maybe your web server are running, or maybe where your web applications are deployed, and then from there you can forward the request to your application server and to your database, which will be inside your private subnet. Private subnet, right? Because you don't want your application code to be exposed outer world. You don't want your data to be exposed to the outer world directly from the public network, right? You can't allow this one. So that's why we create the public subnet. In the public subnet we have the resources like the web server, which will be assigned a public IP. Your request from the internet will reach to your public subnet where your web server is running, and from there the request will be diverted or forwarded to the backend servers. Okay, So this is the concept of your public and private subnet. So what we have learned in this session, what is your VPC, which is referred as VNet or the VCN in the your Azure and the OCI cloud. What is the concept of CIDR? How we can calculate the total number of IP addresses are possible in a CIDR. Then we have discussed about the subnet, and when we create the subnet, again we need to define a CIDR for each and every subnet, which is derived from the VPC subnet, right? And then what is public subnet and what is private subnet, and what is the use of that, what is the difference between them. Thank you.